to Unity today. Our family just returned from France, and it was a little much on my mom, so she's still resting from, that a lot of travel, so I'm just filling in for her today. So we're just going to take this time to leave the world outside of these doors and just come into the presence of this space, this holy space, and chant together. They say to sing is to pray twice, so I will do a call and then you guys will respond. And then I've got Laura out there to kind of lead the response, and Louie, and we'll be accompanied by Josh. All right, thanks.
Kindness of heart. Coming home to Good morning, everyone. Norma is not here this morning because she brought a cold back from France with her. And it's not surprising. We spent 9 days in France at my granddaughter's wedding in a castle. And it was 9 days of wine, champagne, croissants, French pastries. So it's not surprising. It's not surprising. Not only that, it's not surprising that I did something totally out of character for me. I think that you should be aware of a fact that was shared with me by a friend a long time ago, a spiritual seeker. I was joking with him about the ego sleeping on the job. And he responded with, the ego never sleeps because it has no eyelids. So it was such a stupid remark, and it remained with me. I've actually shared this on a couple of occasions, but it came to light while I was involved in France with the wedding. I was officiating. I'm going to be the minister for the wedding of my granddaughter. And let me say this wedding was so lavish. It rivals the coronation of the Queen. And we had not only a rehearsal dinner, there were like 40 people there that flew in to do this, that she flew people in, and everybody in the family was there, and it was lavish, beyond lavish. So I was officiating, I was going to do the wedding, and the wedding's set to take place on this stone altar that leads up to the front of the castle, so that the wedding party was going to come out in the back of this castle that's extended out in that direction. And everyone was seated on the other side, on either side, in folding chairs, on this really ancient stone walkway that ran about 25 yards. And in the back, there was this beautiful grove of trees, and then it was the front of the castle. And I was going to do the ceremony right there, and everybody was going to process down. So the day before the wedding, we had the wedding rehearsal, and everybody that was there was involved, and even the people that were just visiting decided they're going to sit and watch the rehearsal. As it turned out, there were 2 photographers, rather noted photographers, that flew in from Spain to shoot this wedding. They wanted to shoot this wedding because they were aware of this castle that had this incredible winding staircase that came all the way down, and the steps on it were worn down over time. It must maybe over a century. They were so worn down, but you could still walk on them. And so they wanted to do shots of the bride on that stairway, and they wanted to shoot the bride and groom in the different areas of the castle. And so they were somewhat noted photographers, a man and a woman. I think they were married. So I'm doing the rehearsal, and I had neglected to speak to them about my golden rule regarding wedding ceremonies. So the woman was coming down the aisle and only 8 feet away from the bride and groom and shooting pictures. And I said, hey, you can't do that. You can do that now. If you want to shoot the rehearsal, that's great. But in the wedding, you may not come down the aisle and shoot. You're going to disturb everybody watching the wedding. You can shoot anything you want over the heads of the people, way back. If you want to use a telephoto lens, do that. Or on the sides where the people can't see you, you can shoot all the pictures you want to shoot, but nobody's going to be shooting on the aisle. And then the male photographer got involved and said, oh, but we must. We absolutely must. You can't catch the candid looks of the bride and groom unless we get those shots while it's happening. I said, if you come down this aisle during the wedding ceremony, I'll stop the ceremony and throw you off the aisle myself. Anyway, he said, this is not good. This is not good. You know who I am? I said, it doesn't matter to me. I don't do weddings where people have photographers jumping up and down in front of the ceremony. And then it concluded, as a matter of fact, the rehearsal did not have the bride and the groom. It had two people standing in because they didn't want to be seen. They didn't want to go through the vows. It was all set up that way. Well, after this particular situation took place, I was summoned to my daughter's room at the top of the castle. I went up the winding stairway, and she said, Pop, I have given those photographers explicit permission to shoot this wedding any way they want, anywhere they want, anyhow they want. So these are renowned photographers, and they are going to be able to shoot that wedding from any place they want to shoot that wedding. And I said to her, so I'm not renowned? She said, you're under-renowned in comparison to them. I've received a lot of insults over the years, but I've never been told that I'm under-renowned. It's not a really interesting place to be. So I left the room knowing that I'm obviously going to do exactly what she wants. But then I ran into Cintisha, and Cintisha said, what is this about? What's going on? And I said, oh, the photographers want to shoot in the center aisle, and I can't have them do that. She said, oh, you will have them do that. Or you will be like him. She pointed to one of the paintings on the wall. There were a number of different paintings of people that had lived in that castle and I guess at some point owned it. But in these paintings, some of them had a black scarf painted in around their neck, which meant, if you wanted the painting, that person was beheaded. And that's what Cintisha was pointing to. She said, you will or you'll wind up like him. So it caused me some deep thought, because this was when that line came up in my mind that the ego never sleeps. You see, I had this rule. I haven't thought about it. Whenever I speak to people about a wedding and they have photographers, I always explain to the photographers, you may not shoot on the aisle. Afterwards, we can pose anything you want. You can shoot from the sides and the back or over the side. Do whatever you want to do, but not while the ceremony is taking place. I don't want you coming down in front of everything and everybody watching and shooting pictures. And I never had any bad feedback. Photographers I'm talking years and years of weddings that I never had any feedback except from these two people who were more renowned than me. And so I lost it. It's just like the ego never does sleep. It was such a stupid thing to do. I mean, it was her wedding, and to have reached that stage of resentment for these people and resistance and conflict is totally out of character for me. But I attribute that to all the wine and the French pastries I had consumed. Let me tell you something about French pastries. If you don't get anything else out of this, don't ever just brush them off, French pastries. Let me say something. There is nothing in the entire world as addictive as French pastries. They are just unbelievably phenomenal. So, anyway, after that particular fiasco, it occurred to me that the ego does not ever sleep. It has no eyelids. So I thought I would never have, I haven't had a confrontation like that in years. And it brought to mind the most amazing parable in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, wherein the ego is symbolically depicted as a cold-blooded serpent who is the most cunning animal of all the animals in creation. And so that is the way the ego is depicted in the scripture, and that is the way the ego actually is. Can we have this first PowerPoint? In Proverbs 16, 18, and 19, this came to me once I ran into Cintitia, and she told me I was going to be beheaded. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. It is better to be of a lowly spirit among the poor than to divide the spoil with the proud. And that was obviously very true. And it just occurred. I got into this conflict without any second thought. Not very many things that I don't check when that happens, but that's the way it was. And then this is true. Can we have this next PowerPoint? You can read this in the book of Genesis, chapter 3, verses 1 to 7. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say, 'You must not eat of any tree in the garden?' The woman said to the serpent, 'We may eat of fruit from the trees in the garden.' But God said, 'You must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die.' The serpent said, 'You will not certainly die.' The serpent said to the woman, 'For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil.'" Can we take that back again, please? Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say, 'You must not eat from any tree in the garden?'" The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say, 'You must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die.'" "You will not certainly die," the serpent said to the woman, "for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." This, of course, is just one of the ways that the masters attempt to reveal mankind's dilemma, mankind's fall from the Edenic garden. You should know that in the actual Hebrew, the Garden of Eden is the garden of delight, joy, and happiness. So what we're not talking about, as some people still think, there was actually a garden where this took place. It is another symbolic way of sharing with human beings that all of this takes place in consciousness, the fall of mankind. Look, we're made in the image and likeness of God, but we fell. And how did we fall? We ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which was the grand assumption that we were born into in this world. The grand assumption that we had the capacity to actually judge on the most significant issues what is right and what is wrong. And because we suppose that we are objective observers and capable of judging like that, we do judge over and over and over again. And we judge ourselves over and over and over again. And we neglect to honor what the Master of Life came to reveal to us. Judge not, or you will be judged. Condemn not, or you will be condemned. And the measure you give will be the measure you get back. What does that mean? It means that we have every opportunity here in the school of life to transcend the initial state of consciousness in which we live in the supposition that judgment is something we need to cultivate because each thinks he or she is an objective observer in a world of separate others, separate phenomena. And we do not recognize that underneath the consciousness, the collective consciousness of all humanity, is this illusionary concept of self, which holds that it has the ability to clearly judge others, conditions, circumstances. And that is the underlying flaw. That is the underlying sin that leads to man's inhumanity to mankind. Because each of us simply judges from a picture that comes to mind that is filtered through one's own personal collection of beliefs. The personality that we find ourselves in and living in is developed over years, taking in those things we suppose will be advantageous to us as we attempt to make the world work in relationship to our personal perception, projections, and expectations. Everybody's doing that in the unenlightened state of consciousness. Never taking to mind the idea that it's flawed. And it's the reason why we have extraordinary conflict, extraordinary suffering, and extraordinary pain. Because each ego has its own perception of what is right and what is wrong. So, we are in the school of life. And at some point in our journey, we have to realize that their life must really be better than this. If there's an all-aware, loving God, Creator, who made us in the image and likeness of that Creator, then what is wrong? What has gone wrong? And when you ask yourself, and many people just do this through, they finally realize they can't handle life, and they turn to alcohol or drugs, and some people turn to religion, and they go on and on and on, until maybe they do finally take to task their own awareness and come to realize what the masters down through the ages have been saying. You are in the school of life so that you can subdue the cunning ego, the illusionary definition of self, being a separate body mind capable of objective observance, capable of judging right and wrong. No human being in the initial state of consciousness has the ability to do that. So you're always in error if you're in judgment. And it visits us over and over again. For the measure we're putting out is the measure we're getting back. And then, you can turn to a book like Marianne Williamson's book, Return to Love. And her book, actually, in her own way, she describes how man's journey in the world is all about that, returning to love. But here's the catch. How many people really want to hear the catch and would rather not hear it? How many people would rather leave in their limited definition of self and not hear this catch? Raise your hand if you'd rather not hear the catch. All right. You've done this before. And I'm not one to have the ushers remove you physically. The catch is this. Even if your love is focused on a particular individual or any particular item, person, it will fail and bring hate to some degree. Because when the masters speak about love, they're talking about this state where you have subdued the illusionary definition of self and you're willing to be a servant of that intelligence which has created you. In which case you return to God in awareness, and then you recognize what it means to be truly alive in the fact that you have returned to universal love, in which no one is excluded, but all are included. It means that your priority in your life is no longer this self-centered idea of gaining advantage, but it is an idea of becoming so aware of the miracle of being alive that you begin to honor it by being an emissary, an expression of love. There's no other religion, by the way. What I just said to you is the only true religion. Everything else in the pomp and circumstances, the robes and the middlemen and the priests and the cathedrals, all of that has its place because people need some place to go when they feel guilty. And it works, it serves God too. They can go to confession over and over again. But it's necessary to have that because there are a lot of people who are not yet, capable of taking to task their own awareness and recognizing the fact that your thinking needs to be corrected. Your consciousness needs to be changed. you need to transcend the illusion of yourself as even being, listen to it, to transcend the illusion of yourself as even being special. So, the Bible is not alone. There's been masters down through the ages. Marianne Williamson does a beautiful job of sharing our journey of returning to love. And then we have Eckhart Tolle, who I think is possibly one of the most clear, focused masters of our time. Can we have this PowerPoint, please? You can read this in Tolle's book, Stillness Speaks, on page 64, paragraph 3. That leads on to 65, paragraph 1. Reincarnation doesn't help you if in your next incarnation you still don't know who you are. All the misery on the planet arises due to a personalized sense of me or us. That covers up the essence of who you are. When you are unaware of the inner essence, in the end, you always create misery. It's as simple as that. When you don't know who you are, you create a mind-made self as a substitute for your beautiful, divine being and cling to that fearful and needy self. Is that it for this PowerPoint? Okay. Let me take it back again to the beginning. Reincarnation doesn't help you if you, in your next incarnation, you still don't know who you are. All the misery on the planet arises due to a personalized sense of me or us. That covers up the essence of who you are. When you are unaware of the inner essence, in the end, you will always create misery. It's as simple as that. When you don't know who you are, you create a mind-made self as a substitute for your beautiful divine being and cling to that fearful and needy self. So you see how religion works. In some ways, it's always serving. But in the end, we have to move through it. We have to move beyond it to the reality of the presence of this intelligence in every situation, in every person, in every place. It is possible to be in the consciousness of God regardless of any circumstances that are occurring. That's what is meant by God is omnipresent, everywhere present. But people aren't present. And they say, where is God in all this? Or how could God create all this and create all this and all this misery, all this suffering? Mankind's fall from God consciousness is the underlying cause of man's suffering. Mankind's suffering. Can we take this next PowerPoint, please? You can read this in the Course in Miracles text on page 286, paragraph 2. That's the old edition. I never got around to putting in the numbers for the new edition. You who speak in dark and devious symbols do not understand the language you have made. It has no meaning, for its purpose is not communication, but rather the disruption of communication. If the purpose of language is communication, how can this tongue mean anything? Yet even this strange and twisted effort to communicate, though not communicating, holds enough of love to make it meaningful. Believe it or not, this is not my choice. I had to give Heather these PowerPoints over the phone. I think I mistakenly gave her the wrong ones. This is not what I wanted to share here. So erase it. Let me share this next one with you and see if I got that one right. This is my fault, by the way. That's in the A Course in Miracles workbook, page 137, paragraphs 1 and 2. Today's idea remains the central thought on which salvation rests. For healing is the opposite of all the world's ideas which dwell on sickness and on separate states. Sickness is a retreat from others and a shutting off of joining. It becomes a door that closes on a separate self and keeps it isolated and alone. Sickness is isolation, for it seems to keep oneself apart from all the rest, to suffer what the others do not feel. It gives the body final power to make the separation real and keep the mind in solitary prison, split apart and held in pieces by a solid wall of sickened flesh, which it cannot surmount. Can we take this back again, please? Today's idea, the idea that it's speaking to, is I am responsible for my salvation and the salvation of the world. Today's idea remains the central thought on which salvation rests, for healing is the opposite of all the world's ideas which dwell on sickness and on separate states. Sickness is a retreat from others and a shutting off of joining. It becomes a door that closes on a separate self and keeps it isolated and alone. Sickness is isolation, for it seems to keep oneself apart from all the rest, to suffer what the others do not feel. It gives the body final power to make the separation real and keep the mind in a solitary prison, split apart and held in pieces by a solid wall of sickened flesh, which it cannot surmount. Oh, that's pretty heavy. The quote that I really wanted to have in there before this one was more helpful. Anyway, since you find yourself in unity, which is an advanced form of religious practice, then you are beginning to realize that the state of mindfulness is something that must be practiced. For a long time, the mind simply responds to circumstances which appear to be outside of its purview, that it has nothing to do with those circumstances except it reacts to them, supposing it's an objective observer. But if you allow yourself to continue in that particular level of awareness, who you are is determined by what is happening any given moment, because you're reacting to that which suits your personal expectations, desires, and demands, and you're reacting in opposition to those that don't suit your personal expectation, desires, and demands. Can you see now why this part of the spiritual journey requires a relationship with the divine itself? Without having a relationship through meditation, prayer, affirmation, without having a relationship to be with you in the process of living in a world that is at least completely conflict-oriented, you will not be able to find a life worth living. You'll not be able to find the harmony and the peace that your soul seeks. That's why we have the masters down through the ages. That's all that Jesus was speaking about. So that it is necessary to want a life worth living so much that you're willing to return to love, which means you're willing to surrender your ego-centered projection of life. You can't return to love with it. You must subdue it. You don't completely eliminate the ego. It becomes the servant of a divine consciousness. So it must become the servant. And before it becomes the servant, it will always speak first. It will always speak first. So that when it speaks, you have to wait, pause, and release it, and allow the subtle awareness of your divine nature to say to you, there is, in this situation as in every other one, the opportunity to choose peace, to bestow kindness, to bestow forgiveness, to bestow love. So we're going to take some time to meditate together. You might want to take a couple of deep breaths as you release your breath. Release any pressing concerns you may have brought with you. Such things can be healed quite often quickly when you become present, right here, and unafraid. Just keep taking a couple of deep breaths. Now we take an ideal, which is sometimes referred to as a mantra or mantram, and we open the mind to its truth, gently bringing it to mind. When other thoughts come in, we gently let them go. We return the mind to this truth. Any grievance I choose to embrace destroys my peace of mind and my return to love. Any grievance I choose to embrace destroys my peace of mind and my return to love. Any grievance I choose to embrace destroys my peace of mind and my return to love. As we go forth from this meditation to those places we occupy in time and space, let's go forth with a greater devotion to mindfulness. For this opportunity in every moment, we give thanks. And to this we say, Amen. We will take an offering for unity now. Those of you that are watching live stream, you have all these different ways you can tithe to unity. You can scroll down if you're watching this live stream. There's a place that says donate. If you're watching this on our website, you can go to the top right, it says donate. But do give something back. It's appreciated. And you might consider showing up in the physical center every now and then. Be nice to have you along. Do you know that we actually won the best church in Boulder? We actually won it again. And wait a minute. This has nothing to do with the greatest amount of votes coming for unity. It has to do with knowing the guy that counts the votes. What was that? Yes. No, we've had a lot of years where we've won, and so keep that in mind as you write that check now with all those zeros. As we bring our gifts into our hands, into our hearts and minds, let's bless them with this offering prayer. Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive, because I give. And so it is. Join me now, please. We dedicate this tithe to the will and the work of the Spirit of truth, the Spirit available to each of us, the Spirit that joins all of us. We dedicate this tithe to the victory of the Spirit of truth. Amen. We will have our discussion group for anyone who'd like to stay and discuss today's talk or anything to do with unity. I'll be over there in about 5 to 7 minutes to do that. We have refreshments, tea and coffee over there. So if you want to just hang out, and then in about 5 or 7 minutes we'll gather up in a group and we'll have a discussion. And you may want to just continue to hang out until the next service. because the 11 o'clock service will have Cintisha officiating, and she has some amazingly insightful thoughts which she has garnered over the last visit to France. You want to hear it. I think you should show up for the 11 o'clock. So to everyone, if I don't see you at the discussion group, have a mindful day.